Okay, you're
on. All right, so this week we pick up with Vayikra, chapter 6, verse 17. That is Leviticus chapter 6, verse 17 to the uninitiated. Actually, that's probably not 17. 19, yeah, because those of you who are using the Christian Bible, oh, you're busted. Anyway, we're looking at it very, very, very literally. It says, and he spoke Yahweh to Moshe to saying. Every one of you know what that means, don't you? It is a change of topic. So verses 17 through 21 are a new topic. This says that you should be on 24.
Oh, well, I just saw that it said, and the Lord spoke to Yahweh. No, it's not 24. 24 in the English Bible is, for the Lord your God is a consuming fire.
You're not in the right chapter. It never says that in this chapter.
Okay, no, I'm not in the right chapter. Okay, let's try 6. 24 says, so the Lord commanded us to observe all these statutes to fear our God. No, we haven't done 23.
What are you doing? What? It's chapter 6.
Right. Chapter 6. We just finished kindle the fire. You shall. Oh, I don't know, man, Luke Deuteronomy. Oh, way out there. Okay, 24. Well, that is in the Lord spoke to Moses. See, the one before it was.
If you're using the English Bible, you're on verse 24. Verse 24 says that the Lord spoke to Moses. That's all we need to know. We need to know that it's a change of topic. Any and every time you read that, that's a change of topic. Let's not use the word subject. Topic is the word. All right, so let's go on with 18. Very literally, it says, speak to Aharon and to his sons, and two sons his, to say, this instruction, the sin, in place that you shall slaughter, the burnt offering you shall slaughter, the sin to faces Yahweh, holy holies she. I don't think that's all that hard to understand, but let's go through it. We start off with daber, thus to speak. It's the setting in a row, ranging in order to lead, to guide. These aren't just words that, two friends are just sitting around shooting the breeze. These are words, they're not even words where you're doing the Ask the Rabbi where he's just popping off whatever comes off the top of his head. These are words like what I'm doing today in teaching. Most of what I say, I've actually written down beforehand. I took the time to study it out and write my thoughts and those sort of things. And then I come here and I read to you. And that's not to say I don't go off subject, because I do that a lot. But a lot of it, probably most of it, is actually me reading to you thoughts that I had prior to teaching this. This is what daber is. It's that I've worked it out. I've written the sentence out very specifically so that I don't have a bunch of, I don't get 500 emails about, hey, you said blah, 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 and it should have been blah, 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 because I said somewhere backwards, or maybe, I don't know. Because when you're talking off the top of your head, I'm hearing people getting all over Joe Biden for all the things that he says, and I'm thinking, but I'm not losing my mind, and I do that kind of stuff all the time. It's like every time I try to teach on when second chapter of Acts comes up, and I have to talk about it. I try to tell them, whoever's listening, that there were no Gentiles present, because that's so much of the church today believes that that's when the church started, was when God went to the Christian people and filled them off with the Holy Ghost. And it says right there in the 2nd chapter of Acts that there were only Jews and their proselytes present. So every time I do it, I say, there were no Jews present. I don't know why I do that, but it's almost every time. I have to be really, really careful when I do that. So when you see guys like Biden or Trump say something that's all backwards or all discombobulated, don't be so hard on them, because wait till you have to get up in front of a camera every day. Just saying. These are words that are very much ranged in order, and it says El to Aaron. So he's not just going to just shoot the breeze with Aaron, right? Aharon, to say his name properly. He's not going to do that. He's going to be very careful about how he says this thing, not because he has to worry about political correctness. That's not it. It's the idea behind that being very careful is that make absolutely sure to the best of your ability that your brother understands what you're about to tell him. So you got to be thorough and careful about how you say it, and that's the reason behind it. Then it says ve'el, which is and then it has the arrow. I noticed in the monitor that my hand wasn't there that first time. So anyway, and it says his sons, and to ve'el, and to Banav, his sons. Now, honestly, what that means is his children, not his sons. But since only guys are going to be here in this thing, translators took a little license and wrote sons. I don't do that. I generally write children. But every once in a while I slip up. Then it says lemor. Now, this is not the same word we started off with. This is to say, speak to them. You got to arrange these words in order. And now this is to say to them. It's to bring it to light. The idea of bringing forth and making them understand. It's like you get that idea from the first word, but now he's saying another word that actually literally means the same thing. It is emphasis. It shows that what you're about to tell these people, Aharon and his boys, is very important. All right, then it says Zot. This whole chapter has been Zot. Instead of Hazot, it's Zot. You remember me talking about this. Normally in the older Hebrew, they say Hazot or Hazeh, meaning, the this. This time around, they're just saying the part of the word that means this. And instead of saying Zeh, they're saying Zot. What is that? Well, it's feminine. All right. Then it says Torah. You hear Torah in there, right? Torah. So it's feminine. And it's an instruction. And a doctrine is an instruction, or at least it used to be. It's used of humans, the rules that you have in your house. If someone's going to grow up in your house, and you're feeding them and all that stuff, well, then they're going to live by your rules, right? This is your Torah. And if you write them down, that's your Torah. Yours, not God's, but it's yours. And that's perfectly okay. That is not blasphemy. King Solomon did it with his son. Mm-hmm. You probably read it. Anyway, so these are instructions. It's you got the rule. Now you're going to learn how to carry out that rule. All right. So our next word is hachatat. Oh, we know this word. At least we should. The sin. Chatat. Sin. And you remember this. I'm going to bring it up because I haven't brought it up in at least a week. Don't remember if I did last week, but it's been at least a week. I like to tell people this, whether you're Jew or Gentile, I shouldn't say it that way. Whether you're Jew or Christian, you should memorize this one sentence. Just this one sentence. How hard can that be? Just one sentence. This sentence says, everyone who commits sin is also in rebellion of the Torah, because sin is Torah rebellion. Now, why would a Jew need to learn that? Don't all Jews know this? No, they do not. But a lot of them do. I mean, it's not odd that they would. But I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. Because if you think about what was just said, most of Christianity is running around saying that God doesn't even have the right to tell them what to do anymore because he sent his bouncing baby boy to do his job in his place, which is very cowardly if you ask me. And I know that's really offensive to a Christian, but think about it. The Bible says that when the Messiah comes, God will come. And they're going to call his name, his authority, Emmanuel. Not Ben Emmanuel, not Bar Emmanuel, no, Emmanuel. And what's the difference? Well, one is God with us, and the other one is the Son of God with us. And the Bible says that when Messiah comes, it'll be God who is with us, not the Son of God who is with us. He's not going to get some other man's wife pregnant in, shall I say, the traditional way. Yeah, she's going to turn out pregnant if the whole, what do you call it, virgin birth thing turns out to be accurate, which it does not violate Torah. It does not violate any of the prophets. It don't even violate the New Testament stuff. Now, the way it's been presented, maybe so, but not what the words say. So I'm thinking it's probably right. So if God came, if Messiah actually walked on this earth, that was not God's bouncing baby boy that he had with some earthling. In other words, a God had a baby with a human, so he's half God, half human. Doesn't this sound a little more like Greek mythology to you? So if God comes, if Messiah comes, that's God. That's Emmanuel. Or if you're from Texas, Emmanuel. I can say that because I live in Texas, right? Anywho, this is a verse out of the New Testament letters. It's in complete violation of the teaching that God can't tell you what to do, that you're living by grace and not by his law. Because think about what it's saying. That's why it's so important for a Jew to learn. Because when the Christians start telling you that stuff, you say, but wait a minute. 1 John, hold up your one finger. 1 John, then hold up 3. Chapter 3, verse 4. It's fairly easy. You just have to skip the 2. 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. It's very effective. Says, everyone who commits sin is also in rebellion of the Torah, because sin is Torah rebellion. And the beauty of it is that it helps Jews understand what sin is and what it is not, and it helps Christians understand what sin is and what sin is not. If the Torah says to do it and you do, then you are living in sin. If the Torah says don't do it and you do it, then you're living in sin. If the Torah does not say do or don't, it doesn't make any difference how offended you are by it. It is not a sin. Because sin is Torah rebellion. It's not that offends me, therefore you are sinning rebellion. It is Torah rebellion. So it makes it real simple to understand what sin is and what sin is not. So when I was growing up, the guys weren't allowed to let their hair, you put your finger on the edge of your ear like that, on the little creasy area there. And if the hair was touching the top of your finger, you were living in sin and you were going to hell. They are wrong. because the Torah does not say that. They told women that they could not cut their hair. They're wrong because the Torah did not say that. And on it goes. Every denomination had their own thing, because since they didn't know what sin was and sin wasn't, they had to make it up as they went along. Oh, well, I'm offended by that, so that's sin. That's exactly how that came along. And by the way, that's the same way it came along with the Jews, because you get to the Dark Ages and you have people like Rashi and Maimon and all those guys, none of which spoke a word of Hebrew, not one word of it. They spoke Aramaic and not Aramaic, Arabic. No, that's Maimon. It was mostly Aramaic. That's not Hebrew. That's not even, I used to tell people, well, yes, the kind of the kingly version of Hebrew. No, it's not. It's nothing like Hebrew. The reason why it seems to be like Hebrew is, one, Hebrews stole their alphabet. We don't use our original alphabet. We use their alphabet. Well, you could use the American alphabet and still speak Hebrew. I mean, that's not all that important to the language. But so you start looking and they look the same. And then they have so many words that mean exactly the same thing in both languages that it seems like the same language. And then the teaching of, well, it's the language of the kings comes along, and it pretty much was at the time. But those are not the kings of Israel. It's the kings of Persia. And maybe even as far back as Mesopotamia. I'm not really sure about that. I think I'm probably right, though. Okay, so we can call it the language of the kings. I'll go that far, but not the language of the Jewish kings, if you know where I'm trying to go with that. So you have these guys that don't speak the language at all. They don't know anything about the history, the customs, the culture, or any of that. And they don't know this verse. They don't know how simple the understanding of sin should be. This is how simple it should be for us to know what it is and what it isn't. They don't know about this. So what do? They start making new rules. Hey, you got to wear yourself a kippah on top of your head, and if you don't, you're going to hell. I know that didn't start until around the time of World War II. I get that, but it's coming from the ideas they got in the writings of men from the Dark Ages who didn't know what they were talking about. And unfortunately, these are guys that speak Hebrew that fell into this. They won't do the things that God says. They won't wear a fringe with a blue string through it, even though it says it twice in the law of God. They won't do that, but they'll put the kippah on, and by God, you're going to hell if you don't. I don't get it. That's why everybody needs to learn this. If you're a Jew, this is what sin is and what sin is not. If you're not a Jew, this is what sin is and what it is not. End of line, end of story. That's all I need to say. I said too much. All right, then we have Bi Mekom, which just means in place. It's to stand right there in that spot. That's all we need to know. Asher, this one is always a stumble over because it sounds so stupid. This is a Hebrew word that we're going to either write WHICH, that which I said from the beginning, WHICH, or that, this or that, THAT. Not a lot of explanation needed there, I'm thinking. Then it says, T shachet, you shall slaughter. It's to slay animals, especially a victim. You ever thought about especially a victim? They even use this of slaying an army, slaying a person because you killed them. But it's more the idea of, it's more tied in more specifically with the idea of a sacrifice. So you got to kill the animal to sacrifice it. Otherwise, you'd be eating the animal while it's alive, and that's just gross. All right, then you have ha'olah, the burnt offering. Olah. Olah, burnt offering. So if somebody says hola and they're waving at you and stuff, they're inviting you to a barbecue. I'm just saying. Down in Texas, everybody's like, what? Then it says T Shachet. Isn't that what we just said? T Shachet. Oh. It's because it's the word I just said. Okay, never mind. The next word is Ha-Chata. Just had that one. That's the sin word. That's the what sin is, what sin isn't. That's the sin word. Lipne. Now this is two faces. It is face in plural. Faces, right? And so it's idiomatic. Two faces, Yahweh. So God has more than one face. So he's got one here, and one here, and one there, and one over here. Maybe one sticking out of the top. No, it's not anything like that. Oh, I get it. So it's like a trinity. There's like three. No. Oh, I know. It's like the duality thing of the Gnostics, right? No. I've said this before. When you're talking about a living God, the living God, because in Judaism there is only one and no more. He did not procreate and create more gods. He did not speak the word and there were more gods. Nope, there's just the one. There were none before him, there are none beside him, and there are none that will ever come after him. There's just the one. Which is why it was Emmanuel who walked on earth and not Ben or Bar Emmanuel. By the way, Ben is Hebrew and Bar is Chaldee. So those are the two that you see in your Hebrew Bible. Anywho, so when you speak of God, you speak of him in the plural. Why? Because he's alive. And his face, if it was just a face, he would be a carved image because he would only have one attribute. His face would never move. If he's alive, your face moves constantly, whether you realize it or not. Even if you're sleeping and you haven't turned all night long, your face is still moving because it moves when you breathe. It moves when you turn your head. It moves when you're thinking. It moves when you're speaking. So you have faces. It's plural. It's not singular. That's the only thing that plural has to do with the likes of God. So when they talk about his face, they say faces. When they talk about God and call him, they don't call him El. They call him, well, they do, but that's a grammar thing. They call him Elohim, gods in plural. So it doesn't mean that there's a trinity. It doesn't mean there's a duality. No, it's nothing like that. He's spoken of in plural because he's alive. And it's speaking of his attributes when they're using the word God, because it literally El means hero. It doesn't mean God. But it's used of God because the real God is a hero. He is a conqueror. He is a savior. He is strong in battle and all that kind of stuff, right? So we call him a mighty hero, and that gets translated to God. But when you're calling him God, you're calling him Elohim, mighty heroes. All right, so our next word is Kodesh, and this is holy. A thing consecrated to God, especially in silver, consecrated in the temple, a sanctuary used of holy tabernacle, and the tabernacle, especially of the body of the temple. A most holy thing, as the ark, the holy vessels, sacred oblations, the innermost part of the temple. I don't really feel like that explains what holy is. Holy is something that is set aside for God and God alone. You cannot mix the pure with the impure in God's world. You cannot mix the clean with the unclean in God's world. These things do not go together. So when we take something to God, we clean it all up. Like say we're making our utensils, the spoons and the forks and the things for doing the work of God. Because if you're making bread, you'll have utensils for that, which is part of the service of God. If you're slaughtering animals, you have special knives for that and specialty tools and things for stoking fires and stuff. All of that are the utensils. So they get dirty, right? And so the idea of this mixing pure and impure doesn't really fit, does it? I mean, for sure, we're going to wash all these things to keep them in a state of pureness, but they don't stay in a state of pureness, right? So we can't attribute that idea to holy. It's not correct. Holy is something set aside. So if you have utensils that you've made specifically for the use of the temple, those utensils cannot be used for anything else. You can't use them for Hanukkah. You can't use them for Sukkot or Pesach or any of those things. These are used specifically for the work of the temple. And then if you do set aside something for those holidays, you can do so, but they cannot be used for anything else. And so you can say, well, these are set aside for the holidays of God, and that's fine. They can be used in all of the holidays, but they can't be used for the 4th of July. And there's nothing wrong with Jews celebrating the 4th of July. There's nothing wrong with being proud of America and its heritage. Despite what's going on in the world today, there's nothing wrong with it. But you can't use these things that are set aside for God for those other holidays or for any other reason. So holy, the idea of holy is not about the purity. You try to keep it as pure as you can, but things are going to get dirty, and then they're going to be washed, and they'll be in a state of pureness again. But that's not what makes them holy. You follow? Because humans have the same problem. We're supposed to be holy before God, but we're not always pure. That's why we tend to take a lot of showers in our lives. Some every day, some not so much. But the whole idea is you get dirty, you clean yourself up. But it also works in the other way. You commit a sin and you do what the Torah tells you to do to make that, to correct what you've done wrong. Because there's a price to be paid. If you steal, you don't just pay back what you stole. You remember that? There's more that you have to do. So you have to do these, you have to repay according to the Torah, not according to what feels good to you. And then once you've done that, you've been purified again. But the holy part, it gets, I guess that's where, if we could say anything about grace, that's where it would be. Because we become unholy when we do these things that are wrong. And if we do what God says to do to make those things right, then we become, we've never really not been holy. We're still set aside for God, even if we've messed things up. Let's put it that way. So in those times when we've messed things up, between that and the time that we get ourselves back into a state of purity, maybe we could call that, what was the word I said?
I don't know, impure.
No, the thing about the Christian thing that they got so twisted around. Mm-hmm. Grace.
Oh, grace.
All right, so our next word is Kadashim. It's the same word, Kodesh, Kadashim. Kadashim is Kodesh in plural. So we've already talked about that. And then you know what happens when they're saying the same word twice, right? It makes it more important. It's an explanation point. It's, something along those lines. And then it ends with the word heave, which literally in Hebrew means she. But in English, the way we think of it, we have to think of it in two ways. Sometimes it does mean she, as in that girl over there. Most of the time, it means it, because it is a gender-specific language. It is said of the word who is he or it, and heave is she or it, it. Speaking of an object. All right, so here's my translation. Verse 18. Speak to Aharon and his sons, saying, this is the instruction of the sin offering in the place where you slaughter the burnt offering. You shall slaughter the sin offering before Yahweh. It is very holy. Onkelos by Drauzine and Wagner says, the Targum retains the Hebrew wording, thereby indicating that it is the chatat, or guilt offering, and does not mean transgression. Well, given that that's the subject that we changed to, I would have to agree with it, but not for the same reason. Just throwing it out there. 19. Okay, we got time. Very literally, the priest that from sin, her, or it, he eat they in place holy, you shall eat in court tent appointed times. So it starts off with HaKohen, the priest. And this is not plural, this is singular, the priest. Ha-mechate, or Ham-chate, you can say it either way. Literally, this means that from sin. Chatat is your word, your sin. And we've already learned what sin is. I spent way too much time on that. But we got to keep in mind the words here, that from sin. So the priest, that from sin. Ota. It's just pointing. Yoholena. He eat they. So he's eating from that sin offering. See, we have to have the word offering to understand it in English, but in Hebrew, they don't need that word. Just saying, it's just not part of the sentence. It's not necessary for them, but for that language, if you're thinking in Hebrew. But if you're thinking in English, we got to put that word there. All right. So it's eat is, of course, what you think of. Be makom, in that place, that spot right over there. So it's a very specific place. Well, what place is it? Kadosh. It's the holy place. It's the place of cleanliness, the place that is set aside. It's a place that's set aside for this very purpose. Then it says te'achel, which we just had that word, you shall eat it. Now, it's odd in English for us to switch the what is that? The number? When you go from they will do it to us will do it to you will do it, what is that?
I don't know what it's called. Plural?
Person? You're going from third person to second person to first person? That'd be right?
No. You're going from plural to singular. They to you is plural to singular.
Whatever that's called. I don't know why I've got such a blank here today. This is common in Hebrew. Very common. They do these things for a very different reason than we do. The one thing that I haven't said in a while that I probably should say here is English grammar has no place in Hebrew. Hebrew does not have nouns. It does not have verbs. It does not have person, place, or thing. It does not have, which I've already said, it does not have it doesn't have gender. We're putting all of that on that language so that we can understand Hebrew and English. It's a not the right approach. I don't want to say it's a dumb approach, because if you don't speak the language, you're kind of stuck with it, if you know what I mean. So it's not dumb, but it's not right. It's not the way to go. It's to think of things as nouns and verbs is really confusing if you're trying to understand Hebrew, because sometimes the same word that is a noun is also a verb, and it can be a noun and a verb. If it's used twice in the same sentence, it can be a noun in one spot and a verb in another. Now, we kind of have things like that in English, like shepherd. right? You can shepherd a flock and you can be the shepherd of the flock. So the shepherd of the flock shepherd did the flock. So you can sort of say it in English, right? But even if you use the word for shepherd, roi, Yahweh, roi lo exar, the Lord is my shepherd. You could say, well, that's a noun. The Lord is my shepherd, so it's a noun. No, because the word isn't in there in Hebrew. The Lord shepherds me, I shall not want. But to say the Lord is the shepherd is correct, and to say the Lord shepherds is correct. Neither is wrong, because you can't be the noun without being the verb, and you can't be the verb without being the noun. And that's not true of every word, but it is true. Well, it can be true of every word. It's just not true every time. So you should just leave the grammar out. If you would just leave the grammar out, learning this language is a lot easier. And it's a whole lot easier to understand without it. I'm just saying, just throwing that out there. I used to think there was a conspiracy by everybody who taught Hebrew to make sure no one ever learned it. But once I finally realized to throw out all things English and just learn it and understand it in Hebrew, it was a lot more simple. Anyway, so you're going to eat. Or they are going to eat. Makes no difference. Then it says, Ba ho zar. In the court. The eating of this place is in the court. So what have we learned about the court? It's a holy place. Just saying, just throwing that out there. What court? The Ohel Moed, the court of where the tent of appointed times is sitting. So wherever it is, it's that court. So when they pack up and they move, you don't have to run back to that original spot to eat it. You eat it in the new spot, because that's where you guys know what I'm talking about, right? So here's my translation. The Cohen who makes the sin offering will eat it in the holy place, in the court of the tent of appointed times. So let's look at verse 20. Literally, it would say, all that touch in flesh it, he holy, and that he spatter from blood upon the garment that he spatter upon it, you shall wash in place holy. Imagine that, a way to make something clean that has become dirty. I don't want to say unclean, because that gives you the wrong idea, doesn't it? So we start with the word coal. Coal, all. It's a sound alike word, because coal can be voice. And coal can be all. In this case, it's all. It's totality. So all asher yiga. So all that touch. Everything that touches. The touch. Like, can you see that? All right, I can touch this, or I can spill my food on it. That's touching it. I can spill my drink on it. That's touching it. Somebody can sneeze on it. That's touching it, right? All of these things are touch. So whatever touches it. Be vesara, in flesh, her, or in its flesh. It's just in the feminine. There's no girl here. In its flesh. That denotes the exterior skin of a human, right? It's also the flesh of an animal. They use it the same way. Yikdash. It's harder to hear the word kadosh because they've put the yod in front of it, but it's he holy, or it is holy. I'm afraid if I don't talk about this here, I might forget later. just in case, I may have a note down there, I don't know. But just in case, everything that touches the flesh of this sacrifice, because we're still on the same subject, that has not changed. It doesn't do that until it says, and the Lord spoke to Moses. Of course, it can be somebody else. And Abraham spoke to Jacob, right? That would be a subject change. Same thing. Anyway, we weren't going to use the word subject, were we? Topic change. Because they're basically the same thing, but we're using the word topic for a reason. Anyway, they're not saying that, all right, so you're going in, you're making this sacrifice, and some streaker runs across the front for some reason and happens to reach out and touch that thing, and now that streaker is holy. No, what it's saying is everyone who touches this thing must be holy. So that's limiting who can touch it. It's not saying that everyone or everything that touches it becomes holy. All right. So if a bird happens to fly over at the moment that you're sacrificing and poop on it, no, that poop is not holy. Just throwing it out there. Our next word is va'asher, which is your word this or that, this or asher, this or that. Then it says yizeh, splatter, or spatter, that something like that. It's used of fluids to be sprinkled, to be spattered. So if you can think of the idea of taking a brush and dipping it in paint and then slinging it, that's what they're talking about. Because that happens in this process, right? You remember the rules about sacrifice. They're not going through the rules of sacrifice here, but that is a allusion to it. Can I use that word? Then we have mi dama. So it's the spattering of the blood. Spattering from that blood. It says all, which is upon, ha beged, the garment. So we're going to be really specific here. Any of that blood that splatters on the garment, this is asher yizeh, that he's spattered. So he's spattering the blood like he's supposed to. He's doing the job that he's supposed to do. And it's saying all the blood that spatters aleha on it, we've already established that it's his robe, techabes, you shall wash. You'll wash it. You don't have to take it out and burn it. You don't have to declare it unclean and then try to make another sacrifice. You're not going to hell because you messed it up. No. Take it out and wash it. It's to tread or trample with the feet, because that's how they used to wash it. Get it all wet, lay it on the rocks there beside the river, and walk on it. I actually saw someone do that in India not too long ago. While I was watching TV, but they were in India, and that's exactly what there's 2 or 3 of them washing clothes, and that's exactly what they were doing. I'd never seen that before. I don't think. Of course, that memory may be from 20 years ago, for all I know. But I do remember seeing it. Hence, to wash garments by treading on them when underwater, it differs from rachatz, to wash the body. There's an example given of Isaiah 7:3, and it also says it's in Isaiah 36:2. A washer of garments, a fuller, one who cleanses soiled garments and fulls new ones. The fuller is the one with the fuller stick that beats on them with the stick to clean them. So it's the whole point is that you're washing something. It's not how you do it. I guess is why Jasenius felt that was important. I'm losing my voice. Hang on a second. I know this is probably awful for you guys, but I don't know what else to do right now. And yes, they're sugar-free and all that stuff. B'makom, in that place, that spot, that very specific place, kadosh, So you're going to wash it in the holy place. You're not going to go out somewhere else. You're going to do it right there on the spot. So here's our translation. All who touch the flesh will be holy, and all that is splattered from the blood, if it splatters the garment, you shall wash in the holy place. All right, let's look at our next verse. Yeah. And vessel clay that you shall boil in it, he shatter, and if in vessel brass, boil it, and scrubbed and rinsed in waters. This was kind of interesting. Ucheli, which is an vessel, it's whatever is made. It's, it's a bowl or a plate or a cup or anything that can, we call it a vessel, right? I don't think it's important that we think of it as something that can hold water, because it's not really the idea, because it can be something flat like a plate, which isn't really flat if you think about it, but it can be flat. Let's just say it that way. It's just something that's made. And it says cheres, it's made of clay. So they say pot shards, because pot shards are made of clay. A vessel of earthenware, a pot shard, proverbially for anything of no value. This is asher tevushal. You shall boil. This is bo, which is a sound alike. It means in it. Ye shaver. It looks to me at this point like it's saying that you put boiled water in it for the cleaning purpose, and then afterwards you break it apart. You shatter it into small pieces. I think that's what it's saying. We'll see when we get to my translation. This is Ve'im. So, and if Bicheli, if that vessel nechoshet is brass, and oddly enough, I never did find this out because no one ever wrote me about it. I asked y'all to do that once just in case. But in the Jacinius, it says brass, comma, i.e., comma, copper. So I don't know if there is a difference between brass and copper. And if there is, why they would say brass and i.e., which is in other words, copper. I've always wondered about that, but I don't know anything about metals, so I am the wrong guy to ask. Somebody knows the answer to that somewhere. Anyway, so it says brass, in other words, copper, especially is hardened and tempered, and like steel used for a weapon, which was nothing like steel. It was be more like cardboard, but cardboard that can definitely cut you. Used for a cutting instrument, yeah. Because think about it, that's not a very strong metal. It's not. It really isn't like steel, but it's hardened apparently in the same way that steel is hardened, I think was their point. Then it says bu shala, which is boil it. And that's used of things that are cooked in it, via the boiling water, but it could also be used as boiling water for cleaning. So keep that in mind. This is umorach, and scrubbed, to rub something, to do the polishing, wax on, wax off thing. Then we have veshutaf, and rinsed. So they're telling you that you're going to wash and rinse it if it's made of brass. And then bayamim, you're going to wash it, rinse it with water. So your translation, and the clay vessel that you boil it in, the garment that's being cleaned because blood has been splattered on it. That's what we're talking about. Subject has never changed. And the clay vessel that you boil it in is shattered. And if it is boiled in a brass vessel, it, speaking of that brass vessel, is scrubbed and rinsed in water. Onkelos by Drazina Wagner says, earthenware vessels are porous and absorb the taste of the holy sacrifice. This creates a problem since 715 states that anything that becomes notar, in other words, left over, from the offering must be burned. Since the vessel cannot be burned, they must be destroyed. Oh, that's why they're doing the boiling. It's not to use the water to clean the garment. It's to clean the vessel. So since the vessel, the clay vessel, cannot be burned, they must destroy it. This is something that Rashi said. He based that on the Babylonian Talmud in Avodah 76a. The principle of absorption into the pores of a vessel is also fundamental today in the laws of kashrut, and that's kosher. Unkosher metal vessels can be made kosher by boiling them or subjecting them to intense heat to remove non-kosher food elements that adhere to the surface. This process cannot be duplicated in earthenware since the non-kosher food is absorbed into the pores of the vessel. Hence, once an earthenware vessel is rendered non-kosher, it must it must no longer be used. It must no longer be used. Here we find that God slapped himself on the forehead and said, gee whiz, Wally, I didn't see that coming. Good thing Rashi was around to fix things. Truthfully, that's probably the reason why the earthen vessel is broken. But God didn't say that. The Word of God does not say that, and it's conjecture. I think it's right, and I think to do it that way, we should, because God said to do it that way. But why? We can't be sure. All right, let's see. We got time. How many verses are in here? I may have to go a little bit long. Oh, yike. Because we don't want to have a week with just 2 or 3 verses. So 22. All male with priest he devour, her holy she. Well, this won't take long. Kol, which is all. Zachar. Now that sounds like the one we tried to teach you how to remember. Zachar is in the garage. To remember, it's a sound-alike word because Zachar is also the word for male as opposed to female. A guy, a dude, a male. This is Ba Kohanim, so that's with the priests. Yochal will eat it. Ota, which is it. Kodesh, that's holy. Kadashim, holies. Remember that in that super holy place?
There's just one more verse.
Heave. Oh, we only have the one more? Oh, that's really good. So our translation, every male among the Kohanim will eat it. It is very holy. Very holy. Very holy. It is so holy you can't even imagine. All right. So we get to our last one. Maybe we won't be going over. Verse 23 for me. And all sin that he bring from blood to tent appointed times to cover in holy not you shall eat, with fire you shall burn. What? Don't you love these very literal translations? You see why they're no good? All right. The whole and all, everything, totality, all chatat, all of the sin offering. Remember me saying you don't actually need that word in Hebrew, but you really do in English, because otherwise, what? Asher Yovah, that he brings. All of these offerings that are being brought, that the priest brings, because this is it's Bo, to come, to enter, But to go and to leave, just think of it as he brings. Mi dama, from the blood. From the blood. El, you bring it from the blood to Ohel, to the tent. Moed, the tent of appointed times, appointed meetings. Le chaper, to cover over. Whence a covering? To overspread with anything, as with pitch. I'm overspread right now with my talit. I'm just saying. Bakodesh, in holy. This is our word holy, that thing that's set aside. Lo, so we have not, it's the negative article, it's going to negate something. Not te achel. So do not eat. Don't do it. Ba'esh, with fire. Esh, it imitates the sound of liquid being poured on a griddle. It's supposed to imitate the sound of fire, but it kind of does. But to my mind, not really. All right, so then it's tisaref. You shall burn. It's weird. This is a strange word. This is one of those, one word, lots of meaning. To suck in, to absorb, to drink in, to swallow down. To absorb with fire, they say. In other words, to burn, to consume, as towns, houses, altars. Used of the burning of a corpse at a funeral. Also to burn and to bake bricks by an oven. So it covers a lot of ground, doesn't it? Our translation then is, and all the blood from the sin offering that he brings to the tent of appointed times for a holy covering, you shall not eat. You shall burn it with fire. This is, something's wrong with this. And all the blood from the sin offering that he brings to the tent of appointed times. One of these words has the wrong information. I've got the wrong word.
Mine says, and no sin offering of which any of the blood is brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement in the holy place shall be eaten.
Say that first half again.
But no sin offering of which any of the blood is brought to the tent of meeting to make atonement in the holy place shall be eaten. It shall be burned with fire. That seems odd since they were just talking about you will eat it. The verse right before it says, and you shall eat it, but this one says, no sin offering.
Oh, he's not talking about the sin offering. He's talking about the blood. And all the blood from the sin offering that he brings to the appointed times for a holy covering, you shall not eat. That's the blood that you shall not eat. You shall burn it with the fire. That's definitely happening. But I think there's a word for leftover that I think has somehow been connected to the wrong thing. So you got all of the sin that it's to bring from the blood. Wait, all of the what that you bring from the blood? Sorry. Give me a second here to think this through. Because something's just not right here. The blood.
Because if you go back up to 25, they're talking about the sin. The priest who offers it shall eat it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something wrong here. The number is wrong. I've got 3808 two times in a row in two completely different words. So I mistyped one of the words. Oh, and I don't have a computer where I can look. I know what the Hebrew and what I said is correct, but where's the mistake? Let me see your Bible.
Doesn't make sense.
Oh, I was like, what? Let me change out my spectacles here. We're in 6 and you're in 30. Well, mine says essentially the same thing this one says, but they have a note here that might help. And all the blood from the sin offering that he bring to the tent of appointed times, remember we're talking about the blood, for a holy convocation you shall not eat. You shall burn it with the fire. They're trying to explain this away with the priest's part in the offering is burned. So the priest is supposed to eat somebody else's part? It seems strange to me that we would talk about the blood that's brought to the tent. It'd be brought to the tent because we know the law is you got to sprinkle it on the altar. Well, you don't eat that. No one ever would eat that. And it's not put in the fire either. Well, I'm going to have to shut this down for today and have to look into this. I didn't realize that sentence made no sense. And this English translation doesn't either. I'm not real sure where to turn to. There wasn't even a word about it in the Onkelos. Usually if somebody's done something like this, somebody's written something about it. Give me a second. Let me see if I can look this up. What chapter are we in? 6?
Yes.
I'll jump straight to 8. There's 7. Okay, 6. What?
Well, 23 on your computer. 30 in the Bible. I don't know how you write it.
Oh! Well, thank you, Hamash. Now it makes sense. This note should have been. this is Sonsino Hamash, right? Yeah, edited by A. Cohen. It says, this also applies to other sacrifices. If a priest brings any blood of an offering which should have been sprinkled on the outer altar into the interior of the court, the sacrifice becomes ritually disqualified and must be burnt. So all this is, of course, that's Rashi, and you know what I think of him. But all this is saying is, it's already told you that they're going to eat this offering in a very special place, right? That holy spot right there where they're told to do it. And it's just going on and saying it another way, if you don't do it, because Rashi is fundamentally right here. If you don't do that, if you take it inside the tent, or if you take it outside the court, or whatever, it's just another way of saying it has to be done in this holy place. Anywhere else, it is impure, like Rashi said, and it has to be burned. So I can't imagine why anyone would do that after being told several times where they're supposed to eat this. But if for some reason it gets carried outside, something happens and he forgets it's in his hand and he runs out to see what the emergency is, well, now it has to be burned. It's just reiterating how important it is to do all of these things where they were told to do them. Thank you, Hamash, for that little bit of help. I'm sure glad I had that there. All right. This concludes our journey through this chapter. Shalom, y'all.